purpose is doing it right so we can better connect the world. At AAR, we're all about innovation and execution. We have to innovate to stay ahead of the game, stay ahead of the competition, and to go ahead and deliver a great solution to our customer. And we have to execute, because in our industry, we must deliver a quality product, a quality solution, a quality service every day.
What's great about AAR is that even though we have 60 years of experience, we've delivered thousands of aircraft on time, even though we have all this experience, we're not afraid to try something new. And I guarantee you that at this moment, whether it's in this building or any one of our other global facilities, there's somebody out there that is coming up with a new idea that is going to take this company in a different direction. And that's exciting.
We own it.
हम लोग का है.
Zajedno sme posilni.
Jesteśmy właścicielami.
Es gehört uns.
We own it.
We own it.
Thank you, AAR, for hosting this session today. We're all honored to be here as guests of Mubadala at the 3rd Aviation Summit. I think hearing Haldun speak this morning about the purposes of the summit and bringing all of you together sets a really nice tone for what we're trying to achieve. In the defense sector, the purpose of this session in particular is to explore current and future affordability programs and how defense OEMs and solution providers are coping with changes to defense budgets around the world. We're joined on this session by Ellen Lord, President and Chief Executive Officer of Textron Systems. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you.
Ivor Ivkovic, Group Executive Chairman of Paramount Group. Welcome. And Chris Boardman, Managing Director of BAE Systems. Welcome, Chris. Thank you all for being here today. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to throw a couple questions at each of our friends, of our guest speakers, try to sponsor and stimulate a little bit of dialogue among them, and then if I could, take a few questions from the audience to nail down and drill down into the topic a little bit more. With that, I'm going to go first to Ellen Lord, if I may. And Ellen, as a key defense industry producer, what advice do you have for buyers of your goods and services for how best to gain maximum effectiveness from their acquisition resources? As we say in the U.S., the most bang for the buck. And I'd like to, if you could, talk a little bit about how affordability plays into all this versus total package versus unit costs. Please.
All right, thanks, Danny. When you think about the cost of acquisition, I believe it's very, very important to look at the total life cycle cost. Quite often, procurers are looking at the first buy and how much it costs to get the hardware initially. However, there is a cost associated with maintaining that hardware, and there's an issue of your operational availability. So I think it's very important to have adequate communication to understand the mission, and then make sure what you're buying can really meet your mission requirements, that you have the operational availability that you desire and that you need. Additionally, I believe you need to look at what it takes to maintain that hardware, what you need for spares, what you need in terms of support and training. When you think about all of those things, then you really understand what your total cost is going to be. I think you also need to appreciate where technology is going these days, and with the advance of electronics, with miniaturization, with less power consumption, quite often there are smaller systems that can do the same missions that very large systems used to only be able to do. For instance, if we think about unmanned aircraft systems, in the past you needed very large strategic assets to carry out a lot of ISR missions. Today, you can look at medium-size and even small-size UAS quite often, and there's an enormous affordability there to carry out the same missions with a lot more expeditionary capability and so forth. So I think that total life cycle cost and the total cost of ownership, including maintenance and refurb and spares, because obviously you want to kit out your solution to allow you to go downrange and really persevere for a while.
Thank you, Ellen. I worked in the U.S. government for 20 years at the Defense Department, and we constantly pushed this theme that Ellen's mentioned about how what the U.S. brought to the table was this total concept of life cycle from beginning to end. And then we asked our foreign partners to always think about how the U.S. solution included all of this. more and more foreign companies are doing this as well, or trying to do it. And you've been very successful at Paramount Group in South Africa in pioneering the concept of portable manufacturing. How are you bringing this whole concept together, and how is this successful from your standpoint and what you're trying to do with making defense more affordable and cost-effective?
I find this debate really a very interesting debate because Paramount's now 22 years old, and we've always been in the business of making defense affordable for our customers because we've never had a customer that had a lot of money. So it's very interesting how the first world and the third world defense industries have lived in a complete parallel universe. We've worked in nearly 35 countries in the last 22 years, and one of the characteristics of every single deal we've ever done is that we've had customers with huge operational needs, big expectations from their technology, and very, very little money. So there are many, many ways that we have harnessed out-of-the-box thinking to provide customers with solutions that incorporate a lot of what you've just mentioned. It's not just about the acquisition cost of the equipment. It's about how you make it affordable. It's how you produce it in the first place. It's how you design the whole operating and logistical concept so that the customer gets to use the equipment. We've seen so many examples of customers going out, buying extremely capable, very expensive equipment and not even having the operational budget to fuel it. So at Paramount, we pioneered the concept of complete turnkey solution. We start with a relationship which allows us to properly understand the customer's needs. We then typically match the need to a solution that often doesn't include new equipment. We often look at what the customer already has and what we can do to upgrade and modify that equipment, because very many cases in the developing world, the solution's under their noses. It just needs to be enhanced and properly implemented. If not, we then match the solution to we match the requirement to a technical solution, and most importantly, create a financing structure which makes it affordable. And that's the unique selling proposition that we've brought to the developing world. But what I find fascinating is that now the developed world is starting to look at those kinds of solutions as well. And that I find very exciting and very interesting. Portable production is just part of that entire ecosystem, because now what we're finding is that customers want to have the ability to take ownership of some of the giving birth to the product. And that works beautifully for us because they then take the system on board at an emotional level, and it becomes that much easier to train people and to sustain the system in that environment. So lots of lessons from the developing world for the first world, and it's really through dialogues like this that we can impart those experiences.
Thank you.
Danny,
Go
can I
ahead.
build
Go
on
ahead.
that just
Go ahead, Ellen, and then I want to go to Chris.
Sure. Great idea here about innovation in terms of the engineering and the manufacturing. I think one of the things we don't always talk about in terms of affordability is innovation in business models. And I think today, with very constrained budgets, there's a huge opportunity here for OEMs to look at a more commercial model and actually build assets themselves, put them on our own balance sheets, and then sell a fee for service. So lots of different reasons to do that. One is color of money. If there isn't the procurement money to actually buy the systems, perhaps you can lease them by the hour, so to speak. And then if you don't have the time to build those assets, we have systems where we have customers who have a demand signal come to us, and we can be downrange in 90 days. So again, being innovative and affordable, doing a fee for service versus a traditional selling.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks for the intervention on that. This gets to a question that I wanted to ask Chris. Our partners and friends in this part of the world are in a transition period, and they're moving from a place where the UAE, for example, has supported every major coalition military operation that's been going on in the region since the first Gulf War, to a place where they are taking on military operations on their own right. The war in Yemen, what happened in Libya, this sort of thing. As they're implementing lessons learned from these real-time military operations to their real-time operational needs, how do we help them address a reduction in time to market for new products and capabilities that they're sort of on the cutting edge of determining in their real-time operations that they need to implement and put in place immediately?
Okay, I could use two words and I could apply this to the UK, US, anywhere. And the two words would be common sense and embracing technology. So many companies have a similar process. So if we just took the engineering process to develop something, we call it a V-curve. Left-hand top of the V-curve is getting the requirements with the customer. Come down the V-curve, you do your engineering. Come back up the V-curve, you get into test and qualification. Often, we find when we do the analysis, it can be 4 times the amount of time spent in requirement and test and qualification than in the engineering itself. So the key focus for me is get close to the customer on requirements. I think that's the common sense bit of it. Whether that is a new capability requirement or actually quite often a modification to capability that already exists. Significantly reduce that time, make the engineering simpler, and then you can look at the test and qualification and use the technology. We have lots and lots of virtual technology that is proven. Getting the bodies that qualify the work that we do to accept that technology is the big battle.
So from BA's perspective, do you have an example or two of that in the region where you've done that successfully that you could offer?
Yeah, so we are very close to supporting the Royal Saudi Air Force. So we introduced the Typhoon aircraft into Saudi Arabia, and we took on an availability service. So we are responsible for making aircraft available to a capability standard. So we get instant feedback on whether that product is liked, disliked, requires improvement, whether that be capability or whether that be the service of the aircraft itself. And we've made tremendous strides in improving capability and improving serviceability. And we've taken that learning back to the UK and apply it to the Royal Air Force. So that's a great example of where you can work close, very close with a country that is actually in conflict. You can learn, you can do novel things, and you can bring them back to what you call the developed world. So, you know, so that the world that should actually know better, well, often it doesn't.
So Ivor, I'd like you to comment on that from the standpoint, if you would, of appropriate technologies for appropriate needs and requirements.
So really very, very interesting point, because one of the privileges that we've had over the years is that we've worked with customers without sophisticated procurement policies. And in many cases, that's a huge responsibility we take on our shoulders, because the customer doesn't judge us by the engineering, they judge us by the result. But the benefit you have is that you don't have this huge complexity which you've just spoken of. And it's that complexity that makes things expensive. So as Paramount, as we're now working more and more in the first world and getting exposed to these sophisticated procurement processes, we're finding that in that environment, we're no more competitive than you guys are. So 9 times out of 10, it's actually the customer that makes the problem to start with. And I think that today we have defense industries in the world that are so well established, so sophisticated, so capable, that the time has come for customers to judge us on our output as opposed to on our process. And that will change completely the affordability of the industry generally. Now, you know, it also comes down to appropriate technology, because when we look at a customer's operational needs, and we have the privilege of being the specifier, we're then able to specify technology that's appropriate for what, first of all, they need, what the problem dictates, and what the level of sophistication of the user is. I've seen so many examples of equipment that is specified because it meets a price point that achieves a turnover target for the OEM, as opposed to equipment that is specified because it's appropriate for the customer. And that's the next big change in thinking that's going to be required. We found that you can achieve 80% of capability, typically at 50% of cost, if you work out what the 20% is that you're going to leave out. And again, this we've been doing for years and years, and it's allowed us to give our customers capability that they wouldn't otherwise have had if they'd have had sophisticated procurement processes or if they'd overspecified.
So Ellen, is affordability just about giving the customer the best deal possible at the best price? What other aspects do you at Textron look at when you think about giving, making defense more affordable?
Sure, I think there are a few things, Danny. One is this basic concept of communication that we talked about. I think, unfortunately, in this environment in the U.S. and internationally as well, we are all so constrained legally that we're not really having the conversations we need to have to understand what that actual mission is, what the gap in capabilities is, what is needed by the customer. So I think having that level of communication is critical, and a lot of these associations that work to bring industry and government together, I think, have a very, very important role in doing that.
AIA is here, the CEO of AIA, our partner for last night. Thank you to Ellen's point about the importance of these associations.
And additionally, I think what we need to do is start to adapt a few more commercial business models. We talk about the complexity of the requirements, and I think we are spending a lot of time developing detailed requirements instead of saying what just needs to be done. And I think that the defense industry has to take a page out of the commercial industry's book and lean forward, look at what gaps in capability are, develop new products, and come to the market with them, and then have a commercial pricing structure so that those things can be purchased. And frankly, everybody talks about acquisition reform. I believe, particularly in the U.S., we have the ability to do this. We perhaps just don't have the will to do this, to be a little creative and do things a little outside of the box. And finally, I think in terms of affordability, we need to look at all of the hardware we have fielded right now. And I think we need to go back to the concept of spiral improvements and look at what we can do for an incremental investment and really give a step function change in capability. We're doing this whether it be a family of wheeled vehicles where we have a variety of variants, so you can sort of crawl, walk, run in terms of the capability, or whether it be unmanned aircraft systems where we've had services invest a lot of money. There's not a lot of money coming up for new starts, so that's where we have to be smart on the industry side and invest ourselves and provide a new product that frankly is taking what's already fielded, bring it back, change out perhaps 30 to 40% of that hardware, change the software a little bit, and all of a sudden be able to address a whole array of new mission sets.
You want to make a point, Ivor?
We've actually had quite a different experience. What we've seen is that it's far more cost effective to start with a clean sheet design when it comes to things. Let's just take armored vehicles as an example. So many armored vehicles that are out there at the moment that were fielded 20 years ago were based on 30, 35-year-old technology. Manufacturing techniques have changed, materials have changed, and the whole concept of just upgrading and modifying and changing this legacy technology makes this stuff more and more expensive. So in our experience, we chose to start with an absolute clean sheet design. So today we produce a whole family of armored vehicles with common platforms, common drive lines, common components, at a fraction of the cost of legacy vehicles. Now, not only are they using new materials, new manufacturing techniques, much, much simpler production, but we're able to bring them to market much more quickly than we could modify the legacy stuff. And my personal opinion is that one of the reasons that equipment is becoming so expensive is because of these incremental changes. We had no choice. We had to start with a clean sheet of paper because we didn't have legacy vehicles to build on. And it's been a huge asset because today we have some of the most advanced vehicles in the market, lowest production costs. We've just set up a factory in Kazakhstan where we're producing armored vehicles from sheet metal, and the entire factory took us 2 years to establish in the middle of the desert in Astana. Now, you can't do that with with old style manufacturing techniques. And I think that it's really important to kill this incremental improvement thing dead if you're going to keep up with the times. Well, my opinion.
Counterpoint here, if I may.
Quick counterpoint.
Okay, quick counterpoint. I think you can also look at what's out there for bills of material today and how you can take and recombine what's out there and add a little bit of new and very, very quickly get to the market. Because I'll counter your vehicle example here with building a jet in less than 2 years, using a lot of parts that are there and adding some new capability and coming out with something that's affordable and first flight in less than 2 years. So I think they're, different parts of the argument.
Agreed.
Chris, the UAE is going through a little bit of an evolution. The leadership has made it very clear over the last 5 years that the warfighter is going to be fighting wars, and the warfighter should not be doing MRO, should not be doing supply chain management and maintenance, that all of those things should be outsourced to let the warfighter do the main operational duty of fighting a war. What partnerships and collaboration are key for that to be successful in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other countries here in the region in the future? From your standpoint, what's the best way to establish this through all aspects of the supply chain, through all aspects of creating appropriate MROs and those sorts of public-private partnerships?
So the first thing I should say is people look at BAE Systems as an OEM. 50% of our revenues are service-based. So 50% product, 50% service-based. So we've gone big time over the last decade into that space. Why? Because you have to. So taking examples, I'll use a UK example, but you could apply this to what we're doing in Saudi Arabia. So in the UK, and it's a business model issue as well, we strike a deal. And the deal is you will take the operating cost of the aircraft below any industry norm. If you achieve that, you take the money and you invest it in the capability for the product. That makes it more usable for your domestic user, and it makes it more attractive to the export customer. That's the deal. Will you do it? Well, the answer is we have. So we had Typhoon in service 12 years, quite mature, come down a support learning curve. We've now signed, in the final stages, signed a contract that will say we will take that 40% lower to operate, well below any norm that you could actually use, conventional norm, and then we'll take the savings and we'll reinvest into capability. To be allowed to get into that business model conversation, you have to have a lot of trust, because it's easy to say you're going to take the cost out. If you fail and you've fundamentally changed the operational structure of that military force and you fail, that is more than a cost issue. That's a big impediment. If you're going to take the money and be privileged to get it back to reinvest in capability, you have to be trusted to get that capability delivered to the timescale that you said it was going to be delivered within the cost. So it's a massive trust issue. The only way to get that trust is to start small, do things well, get pilots, and then move on to that bigger, grander scale that I've outlined.
Saudi and the UAE are, in particular here in the region, are increasingly interested and concerned about innovation for the future. 2015 was the year of innovation in the United Arab Emirates. As the militaries, as the defense establishment here looks towards innovation for the future, how do you price that into your partnerships and what you do with them and make it more affordable for them to become innovators, Ellen?
Well, I think we have to figure out how to partner, just as you said, and I think that we have to lean forward and bring our developments and work hand in hand, perhaps with some of our programs that became victims of bill paying in the US, so we are half to 3/4 the way developed in a capability, and come and partner here in the region with local Emiratis, for instance, and finish the design and development of those different pieces of hardware and then let them be manufactured here. I think that's the fastest way to go on these types of things, and I know that many of us are trying to crack the code on offset to figure out how to do that to better support the other contracts we already have. But there are a lot of things that could be finished here, and I think in that process of engineering, you're training people and they're learning so that they can in turn develop their own products.
The U.S., for example, has joint cooperative
Kratos.
R&D programs around the world with various countries, with various partners and allies. Why don't we have anything like that in the Arab world? Is it time to be thinking about that in the UAE? And I'll ask each of you that question, because that's the cutting edge of the future here.
Yeah, I think that goes back to innovation, just not in engineering and manufacturing, but innovation in the business models. And I think we're at the point where there's enough maturity here in a lot of different organizations that they're willing to do that type of thing. And I think it's a fabulous idea.
Can we, the U.S. and Britain and other countries, can we get out of our own way to work together and do that with them?
Well, I am not the State Department. I think that industry can advocate and get DOD behind us, and I think we can make a strong case for that, because it should be a win-win.
Ivor.
We have living proof of that today. We've just had the privilege of making an announcement that it's all about Boeing and Paramount collaborating on the development of the ARLAC Advanced High Performance Light Aircraft Platform, which is about exactly this kind of industry collaboration. Boeing's mission system, our aircraft, global market. It's taken a product that would have probably taken Boeing 8 or 9 years to develop on their own, which we've already developed, and us 8 or 9 years to develop a mission system, and we'll be in the market in a couple of in months if we need to be. And this is a perfect example of how industry collaboration has to happen. Customers are demanding product in the market fast, and we've all got bits and pieces that together can make an entire new generation of solutions for our customers. We have to work together, and this kind of collaboration is going to be the way of the future. And
Will that collaboration be with the UAE or Saudi or somebody else anytime soon?
So incorporated in that is Paramount's whole philosophy of portable production. Because within the context of a collaboration between Paramount and Boeing, there's lots of space for collaboration with our customers. And we encourage that. We want to see that. And a lot of the technology that we've developed over the years has been developed in collaboration with our customers. We've never got 1 cent of development capital from our own government, not 1 cent. Everything that we've developed has either been money we've spent ourselves out of our own pockets, or with our partners, or ultimately with a government that needed a solution. So it's a model we've been living with for years and years and years.
Chris, I'd really appreciate your input.
Yeah, so I think defence is about collaboration. It has to be collaborations between governments and between industry. I think that was the heart of your kind of commercial entity collaborate without the help and support of its government. Very difficult, especially when you get into what we mean by innovation, which is combating the next threat, keeping that cutting edge in terms of military capability. So there has to be. Other examples, I can give you 2 examples that we are fundamentally part of. One is in India. So we have 40 to 50 years of building military aircraft in India, firstly with the Jaguar aircraft, and now made in India Hawk training aircraft. That's one example. Getting at the heart of innovation, the cutting edge technology side, I think that's the next step. Best example, if I went back to Saudi Arabia, where we have a government-to-government agreement. It's a government-to-government contract. BAE Systems is the prime contractor to the UK government in that relationship. We manufacture in Saudi Arabia. We support in Saudi Arabia. We have 5,000 employees. The majority of those are Saudi nationals. We invest in Saudi industry, and we look to them to develop product in the future, and we help them to start that process. We're doing that now. My ambition is that they will develop and collaborate on future military aircraft and other systems. That's my hope, that's my wish, and I actually think the needs of certainly the UK and Saudi Arabia probably take them in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open it up for Q&A from the audience, but before I do, I just want to give each of the panelists an opportunity if they have one last point they want to make, and we'll start with Ellen.
I think I'm all set.
Okay, Ivor?
I think that the final point I want to make is that the opportunity for collaboration is bigger now than it ever has been before. And the concept of collaboration between players in the industry is an old one. But what's starting to happen is customers around the world, governments around the world, are wanting to own as much competence as they possibly can. We've had to live with this for years. a lot of the established players have avoided sharing technology, have avoided giving away the family jewels. I think there's going to be a lot more of that happening. And as an industry, we have to be a lot more open to sharing technology, for releasing source codes, for doing stuff that have traditionally not been easy to do. You know, the Made in India program is a perfect example. The Indian government is not joking. They want their own defense industry. And we as an industry are either going to become collaborators with them in achieving that, or we're going to become victims because they're going to find other ways to take our technology. If you look at what's going on in China, exactly the same thing is happening. And you know, the elephant in the room at the moment is that a lot of the technologies that we've all developed over many years have cost us billions and billions of dollars to develop. We all have the same risk. And that risk is that we will either have our technology stolen from us, or we will have our technology absorbed through collaboration. I'd like to see a global movement towards collaboration so that we don't land up in the defense Cold Wars trying to avoid each other stealing our technologies.
Thank you. Chris, from your perspective.
Nothing much more to add.
Okay.
Just some simple words, common sense, embrace technology and collaborate. If you do those things, you'll be well.
And we'll make the price more affordable.
It'll make the price more affordable just by doing that.
Okay.
It will become, rather than chasing costs will come down by just taking those simple moves.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my only rule about questions is that you identify yourself, your affiliation, and that what you say actually ends in a question and not some sort of statement. So with that, if we could open it up for Q&A, and I have one or two people in the room I'm going to call on if I don't get some hands. So, sir, over here, please, in the white jacket. Wait till he brings you the mic.
My name is Mario Sopran. I'm Chief Scientist of the Romanian Space Agency, but also I am rapporteur of the European Economic and Social Committee on the defense industry. If we are talking about the terms of our discussion here, we are thinking how to produce less expensive and with high performances armaments, new types of armaments. That's different if we are talking about Russia, which is this country is obliged to produce all the armaments alone. And if we are talking about the Europe, think about we are sending an expeditionary corps based on tank brigades somewhere. French, Leclerc, Chieftain UK, and Leopard Germany. The officer in charge of logistics, after 1 month, he will be client of the psychiatric hospital. That's clear. That means the idea which we promoted starting
Can we get to your question,
2010,
sir? Your question.
What do you think about the promotion of new category of armaments for alliances, like the European Union, like the NATO? In European Union, we baptize this like Euro armaments. That means one tank for Europe, one armored vehicle, or two types, because in 2009, for 14 major types of armaments, the Europe developed 92 projects, and the United States only 27. Which means it's a catastrophe. You cannot develop in Europe, in the European Union, 14 different armored vehicles. Because finally, the people will buy Patria or Movac. That's clear. And that's the matter. What do you think about this idea to have, okay, the European Union, they started this pooling and sharing, which is a first phase, but the final solution should be one category for the major armaments for the alliances. It doesn't matter if it's NATO or it's...
Okay, thank you. I think we got the question. I think I'm going to take another question or two, and we can sort of roll them together as in some collaborative, collective responses. Next, another question. Dave, I'm going to call on you as my partner here. If I don't get another hand, you're next. Go ahead, and then we'll do Dave Melcher.
So the question I had was, I know Ellen and your company have had some experience with non-programs of record, in dealing with those, both with the U.S. government and then trying to create opportunities abroad, but not usually with the support of the U.S. government. And, I'd just like to sort of get a perspective from all the panel participants about, how cooperative are your governments in trying to prosecute more rapid acquisition, or the creation of capabilities abroad.
Okay. And then, sir, there was a question in the back there, all the way. We'll do that question, and then we'll answer these three.
Yeah, hi, I'm the Air Attaché in the British Embassy, Abu Dhabi, Mike Woods. I want to touch on when defence and the civilian security market are going to collaborate more, not just with police, but actually into the civilian security market, which is quite pertinent to the civil aviation authorities.
Okay, so one tank for each major market in the world, or each major region in the world. Dave's question, and then collaboration between defense and security. Ellen, you want to start?
Okay, so I think that there's a continuum between defense and security, and I think as we see defense budgets coming down, it's a logical thing for defense companies to look at the security sector, and that in turn is forcing us to be more affordable, which is what we're talking about. So I think that when we are looking at products, we need to have a variety of variants of each, so that you can scale and tailor to what the need is. And if we're all smart about it, I think we come up with a family of products, which gets back to Dave's question to a degree. One of the things we find in the US is we have many international partners where we, from a political point of view, are trying to build partnership capability and capacity. And these countries want solutions, but perhaps not the elegant, rather expensive solutions that the US DoD is always using. So what it comes back to is what's known as a non-program of record or non-standard programs. And there's a pull for this. There is a demand signal, and we have a challenge on the industry side figuring out how to contract for that if it's not a direct commercial sale. Now, in some of the more mature acquisition processes that countries have, we can do the direct commercial sale. However, there are many countries that are depending on foreign aid for foreign military funding, or they don't have mature acquisition processes, so they want to go through foreign military sales. Unfortunately, what we see is the US government is not staffed right now to have enough contracting individuals to actually execute on these non-programs of record or non-standard programs, which is creating a challenge because from a policy point of view, we want to be supportive. However, just from a tactical administrative point of view, we have a hard time getting there. And right now, I think one of the good things is that industry and government are coming together in the US and trying to figure out how to do that. How do we provide those non-standard programs to international customers? And it may well come down to contracting vehicles like IDIQs that are broadly defined with a variety of task orders or broad order agreements, that type of thing. But I think, all of us who are from the US would do well to really, really work on that. I know we talked about AIA also. The National Defense Industry Association, NDIA, is taking this one on too. So that's really critical.
I want to press you, though, on the issue of interoperability with the non-standard programs. Where's the rub in that? Where do we start losing our ability to keep improving interoperability with our foreign partners?
Well, I think it depends on what the system is we're talking about, because I don't think by definition a non-standard program is not operable with what's going on. Quite often it's just perhaps a little lower level in terms of capability and so forth.
Okay. Ivar?
The whole discussion about Europe and a tank for each country is a very interesting one, because I happen to agree. I think that if I take the African perspective and I look at the number of operations that require multiple countries to all work together to achieve common objectives, and the lack of interoperability and the chaos that creates, it's starting to lead to a model that is about creating regional capability. And we're now exploring something quite interesting in Africa, where we're saying instead of 5 maritime surveillance aircraft, let's have 1 maritime surveillance aircraft and sell utilization on that aircraft to 5 countries. And that starts making for hugely affordable capability. I have to be honest, it's very, very difficult to get governments' heads around this because this starts messing with issues of national pride.
And national security and sovereignty.
Well, if you have a homogenous society where everybody's loving each other and everybody's working together and neighbors are not suspicious of neighbors, then this is the way to go forward. This is how you're going to make capability really affordable. And we're starting to see this happen in Africa because there are certain regions where we do have people working closely together. And that's got to be the answer for Europe eventually. It's certainly got to be the answer for regional capability. It's a big focus for us, and it ties back into this non-conventional kind of commercial approach. We're doing this currently with vessels. We're doing this currently with anti-piracy brigades. We're doing this currently with a whole host of civil defense capability in Africa. Maybe Africa will lead the way for Europe for once. So that's very interesting. I have no real comment on the non-standard programs issue because we've never done a kind of program of record for the US government, so it's not a problem we've ever experienced. But the truth of the matter is, as I said earlier, we've never been in a situation where that's an issue. Every single project we've ever done has been satisfying a specific operational demand. But what we do try and do is keep some commonality in all of the platforms. So we might deploy 50 variants of a variant of an armored vehicle or 50 variants of a variant of an aircraft, but there is commonality along the way.
We're almost out of time, but Chris, I want you to comment on these last points, please.
Okay, perhaps if I comment on what you need to be successful on international collaboration. First of all, you have to have a very clear common requirement. Don't enter into a collaboration where you pretend it's common, only to find it's different as you proceed. Second thing, you have to have a body that takes authority and decision making. So you can't have all governments can speak all at once and you have to follow everybody and everybody's view. You have to have a procurement system that will actually be quite clear and make industry accountable. And I think once you get into the industrial side, especially where you've got companies who are national champions collaborating, are they collaborating for mutual benefit or are they protecting work share? Are they protecting capabilities? So bad collaboration is when work is duplicated, and bad collaboration is when everybody wants to hold the same capability but pretend through various work share agreements it doesn't, and makes the whole thing very disruptive in the way it and that is a case study sometimes where it goes wrong in Europe. 8 nations, 8 voices, 8 companies, 8 opinions, and no procurement authority. But that is not, Europe is not just the only example where that can happen.
Correct. We hear it all the time here in the Gulf. Don't get in the way of some countries that are way out in front and along the line here when others are holding back and finding a common response to everything. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panelists for a stimulating session this afternoon. And thanks for being here and supporting Mubadala and the Aerospace Summit.